They told us Erebus was unclaimed. That was a lie. The first I knew of it was when the ground trembled under my boots. Not tectonic shift, not weather movement. Something big. I was up on the West Ridge, rewiring an oxygen condenser when the comms went to static and the sky flickered green. By the time I sprinted down to the perimeter, our remote agri-drones were already torched heaps of slag. Then I saw it. 200 meters out, tall shapes, moving in lines, gleaming exoplate, spindly like mantis limbs, chitin glinting under Erebus's twin suns. They didn't sneak. They paraded. There wasn't even a demand broadcast. Just a signal ping, tight band, repeating, vacate. This soil is divine domain. We all got the message. Earth Command didn't. Or maybe they did and said, screw it. The reply came 3 hours later. Hold your claim. Reinforcements unavailable. Protocol free soil is in effect. Free soil. I don't know who coined it, but it stuck. Meant no retreat, no surrender, no evac. The moment you put boots on that dirt, it's yours. And you die on it before you hand it over. We were terraformers, not soldiers. Civilians with high-spec equipment, low morale, and a lot of duct tape. But nobody left. Not when the choice was die trying or die running. We started with the tools we had, reprogrammed atmospheric drones to deliver napalm mist, rewired ore diggers with repurposed plasma arcs, and set them on autoguard routines. I personally welded armor plating to a bulldozer and named it diplomacy. 2 days later, the aliens came in proper. First clash wasn't a battle. It was a message. One of their priests, taller than the rest, draped in gold carapace, came walking through no man's land alone, calm as death. I had a team with rifles on overwatch. I told them to hold fire. The thing stopped 50 meters from our wire, stared at our line with 4 lidless eyes, then pulled a child's toy from its belt, a solar-powered model of our terraformer array. It crushed it, slowly, deliberately. Then it turned and walked back. That night, I melted down scrap aluminum and forged a crude plaque. I planted it in front of our wire. Welcome to free soil. Trespassers will be composted. The thing about terraformers is, we plan for chaos. Acid storms, methane geysers, parasitic root systems. Hell, one time I had to redesign a hydroponic system because of sentient mold. But war, that wasn't in the damn training packet. So we improvised. We broke down our soil phasers, big sons of bitches meant for atmospheric electrolysis, and retrofitted them with magnetic coil rifles. Some of our drone jockeys wired them into a primitive targeting network using salvaged mining comms. Ugly as sin, but they worked. Shot molten metal slugs like railguns. We called them crop dusters. Biochem team brewed acids potent enough to melt exochitin. Bottled it in irrigation sprayers. And you should have seen the grin on Doc Lahane's face when we used crop seeding drones to drop payloads of anti-armor spores. They called it Fertilizer X. I called it War Crime Adjacent. We reinforced the perimeter with bulldozer blades, filled trenches with conductive salt water to screw with their cloaking systems, and laced our outer fields with vibro plates tuned to trigger when stepped on. We weren't building defenses, we were making examples. They tried probing us the next night. Small squad, 5 of them, moving fast, no visible weapons. I was on drone overwatch, sipping cold synth coffee and watching thermal feeds. The moment they hit the trench line, the plates lit up like the 4th of July. One got impaled on an excavator arm we rigged with motion detection. The rest? Let's just say their gods weren't taking calls. In the aftermath, we found what looked like an altar in their forward camp. It had a slab of our terraformer schematic etched into it, crossed out in their script. A warning. Maybe a curse. Maybe just bureaucratic graffiti. Didn't matter. The next morning I gathered the team and said the line that's going to get chiseled onto some monument one day. We're not just defending a patch of dirt. We're defending the legacy of human hands that made it live. Did it sound dramatic? Yeah. Did they cheer? Damn right they did. We weren't civilians anymore. We were free soil. 3 days later, they brought the fire. Not metaphor, literal. Liquid plasma from above, launched in streaks from their sky skiffs, sleek crescent-shaped bastards that moved like snakes through atmosphere. No sound, no warning. Just impact. 3 of our solar towers slagged in seconds. We lost 3 crew. One of them was Marty Vale, our chief hydro engineer, and a good man with a bad poker face. I still remember what was left of his outpost station. Nothing but fused glass and the half-melted wrench he always kept on his hip. The kind of quiet that hits after that. It isn't silence. It's pressure. We didn't hold a funeral. No time. But we did name the crater. Vale's Burn. Every crater, every ruin became a named point of resistance. Every death, a monument. We tracked the attacks, patterns, times, and learned it. Turns out their plasma had a charge decay window. Couldn't maintain heat after 15 seconds contact with our denser Terra fabric alloys. So we layered them, walls of concrete with internal plating made from the collapsed remains of our own tech. They taught us how to burn. We taught them how to bury. The next skirmish was different. They sent in a full squad, armor-plated, shielded, armed with what looked like serrated energy glaives and shoulder-mounted pulse cannons. Not scouts, shock troops. We baited them with a fake power generator made from a weather balloon and a dozen heat sinks. When they breached the shell, Lehane dropped a canister of Fertilizer X and closed the hatch behind them. The screams went on for 17 seconds. We didn't feel good about it. Did it anyway. War isn't about feeling good. It's about feeling enough to do what must be done. And I'll tell you what did feel good. Watching one of their skiffs lose lift when we directed an amplified EM burst from our comm relay straight into its glide path. Thing went down screaming metal across a ridge. We scavenged the crash, got enough parts to rig a pulse lance battery of our own. Later, I sat up on a shipping crate with the brew, watching the twin suns set over smoking wreckage. And for the first time since they landed, I laughed, because I realized something simple, terrifying, and beautiful. They weren't fighting civilians anymore. They were fighting humans. They called it heresy. That was the first time they actually spoke to us, over an open channel, broadcast in that warped dual-tone voice of theirs. Said we had desecrated sacred soil. Said the punishment for blasphemy was extinction. I responded by planting a cherry tomato, dead center in no man's land. Petty? Maybe. But I wanted them to see that no matter how many bodies they dropped, this dirt would feed our people. Not theirs, not anymore. They didn't take it well. 2 hours later, they hit our southern wall with artillery drones. Sleek things, about the size of a jet ski with 6-legged landing struts and recoil dampeners. Our vibro plates took out the first wave, but the second got in close and started chewing through bulkhead like it was paper. We lost Harper and Old Jen during the breach. Would have lost more if not for Kessler. Bastard came sprinting in with a jury-rigged mining torch and tackled one of the drones straight into a rebar pit. Took half his leg off in the blast. We patched him up, slapped a hydraulic brace on the stump, and gave him a promotion. From that point on, he was Sergeant Kessler, and that's when it hit me. What we were building wasn't just defenses, wasn't just survival, it was doctrine. Our own damn religion, forged from welders, wire, and the bones of friends. Tenets of free soil. If you can hold a shovel, you can hold a line. Every piece of wreckage is a resource. You die planting before you die retreating. No gods, no masters, just dirt. They had priests, we had dirt. And the dirt was winning. Later that night, I walked the perimeter, checked systems, consoles, comforted the rookies who hadn't been shot at until this week. Saw the tomato again, still standing, red and proud. I looked at that fragile, stubborn little fruit and felt the weight of what we were doing sink deep into my gut. We weren't just holding ground. We were writing human scripture, one improvised miracle at a time. We woke to thunder, but it wasn't weather. It was drums, not artillery, not orbital strikes. Drums, bone-deep rhythmic pounding that rolled down from the ridge like a storm made of rage. Alien war cadence. They wanted us rattled. Instead, we brewed extra coffee and watched from the walls. They lined up by the dozens, maybe hundreds, just outside mortar range. Tall, gleaming bastards in bronze chitin plate, carrying banner poles strung with what looked like skin. Not human. Not yet, anyway. Their priest came forward again. Same one, I think. Hard to tell with insectoid faces, but this one had the same deliberate posture, the same arrogant strut. He stopped just outside our perimeter and raised his arms. And then he spoke. Not a threat, not even a demand. A sermon. This soil is ordained. It is not yours to shape. Each blade of grass a relic, each droplet of water consecrated. You trespass upon the breath of the lineage. There is no glory in your defiance, only ruin. I waited until he was done, then opened the outbound channel. Buddy, I'm ankle deep in fertilizer made from your frontline scouts. This soil ain't sacred, it's ours. And if you want it back, bring more bodies. We're running low on compost. He didn't reply, just lowered his arms and walked back. And then the real siege began. Waves of them, night and day, skiffs screeching overhead. Biological mines. Yes, mines. Like scuttling crab things, with explosive sacks, digging under the wire. We countered with sonic repellents and pressure mined the trenches. Power grids failed. Air scrubbers overloaded. Half the team developed skin lesions from prolonged exposure to unfiltered microspores. But we held. We held. Kessler fought with one leg and a fury like napalm. Lehane barely slept, brewing toxins and viral cocktails from our dwindling biochem stockpile. I started losing track of days. Measured time by how many parts we salvaged between waves. One morning, mid-attack, I caught myself humming. Old Earth song. Sinatra, maybe? It made no sense, or maybe it did. Maybe madness is just how you synchronize with war. Kessler came up with the rule the night we almost lost Sector 3. We were being flanked. Again. They'd figured out our trench arcs and started using terrain dips we'd previously dismissed. 4 hours of non-stop pressure, and we were down to hand tools and shouting. I was waist deep in a ruptured power conduit, trying to reroute charge to a defense node, when Kessler limped over, braced his one good leg against a pipe, and barked, "If it works once, it's doctrine." He slammed a bucket of volatile slurry into the conduit and sparked it with the torch. The resulting arc fried 3 enemy crawlers and kicked the node to life. The line held. From then on, that was Kessler's law. We wrote it on the side of the power station in soot and blood. If it works once, it's doctrine. It changed how we fought. We stopped looking for solutions. We started looking for opportunities. One crew ran out of shrapnel and filled their mortars with sharpened greenhouse stakes. Lehane weaponized a microbial culture that fed on alien hemoglobin and bonded to air particles. Called it stinger fog. Horrific. Effective. My own personal contribution was the glory coil, a coiled fusion cable wrapped in a ceramic housing that built charge over time, then discharged like a hellish whip. Used it to cut through their heavy infantry. Ugly weapon, loud too, but it worked. Doctrine. The aliens didn't adapt as fast as we did. They fought with tradition, with rules, with structure. We fought with hate, heat, and what we had on hand. And every time they adjusted, we broke the rhythm again. Improvised. Lied. Faked comms chatter. Sent ghost drones into dead zones. Rerouted coolant exhaust into trenches to freeze incoming skitter mines mid-crawl. They called us chaotic. Good. Because chaos is hard to predict. Harder to stop. By week's end, we had no clean uniforms left, no untouched skin, and no doubts. This wasn't just survival. This was innovation under fire. This was the birth of doctrine by dirt. Day 23. We'd survived over 3 weeks of constant siege by what our data suggested was a holy expeditionary force. A full damn crusade, meant to wipe us off Erebus like dirt from a boot. But we were still here, not winning, not losing, just holding. A stalemate. Funny how no one celebrates that. In training sims, the mission always ends with a triumphant last stand or a dramatic evacuation. Nobody teaches you what it feels like to just keep waking up in the middle of hell, rigging broken parts together and pretending it's a strategy. I watched Lehane stagger out of the med bay that morning, skin blotchy from exposure, eyes sunken, but steady. She nodded at me, didn't speak, then went to test another batch of reactive fungi spores she was growing in a chamber formerly used for spinach. Life finds a way. Even here, even us. We had no perimeter left, just layers of kill zones and fallback points riddled with debris, corpse piles, and hastily etched markers like watch step or still hot. But it worked. They'd stopped advancing. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they were regrouping. Or maybe their gods finally told them, hey, those apes are too damn stubborn. And so we found ourselves with an hour. Just one quiet hour. No attacks. No shelling. No plasma rain. Kessler used it to fix his brace. I used it to scrape together something that resembled a meal. Protein paste and fried moss served on a shovel. I called it the Rourke Special. No one laughed. I think we were too tired to pretend food was funny. Then Corporal Ewan spotted something on the ridge. A single banner, raised high, silver and green, the alien symbol for truce. They wanted to talk. Everyone looked at me, so I stood, wiped my hands on my charred uniform, and said the only thing that made sense. Fine, let's hear what fantasy they're selling now. But in the back of my mind, something else whispered. If they're offering peace, it means we've already won something. Because stalemates aren't failures out here. They're the first step in rewriting the rules. I met their envoy at the edge of the crater. We called Vale's Burn. No guards, no weapons. Just me in my scorched engineer's jumpsuit and them in ceremonial armor so polished it reflected the smoke like oil on water. This one was different. Smaller. Less armor, more robes, skin thinner. Probably a negotiator caste. Its translator was built into a harness on its thorax, wheezing out words in broken regal English. This is not a war your kind can win. I shrugged. Funny. That's what we say every time we start one. It blinked, slow, deliberate, each lid moving independently. A tick I'd learned meant confusion. You fight without structure, without prayer, without honor. You invaded our dirt. We didn't have time to write the war manual. It hesitated, then extended a data slate. A real one. High-grade material, clear interface. Message was in standard binary and lineage script. I laughed out loud. Then I folded the slate in half. It wasn't meant to bend. Sparks flew, and the envoy hissed as if I'd just slapped its ancestor. You refuse terms? No, I said. I refuse the premise. And then I pointed, past the envoy, to the hills, where our new perimeter was going up. Welders at work, drones moving supplies, civilians reinforcing bunkers, Kessler standing tall on one leg and screaming orders like a man who planned to live forever. We're not contained, I said. We're expanding. The envoy tilted its head. No fear, just a calculation. You will regret this. Maybe, but I'll regret it with 2 lungs full of Erebus air, drinking coffee brewed on free soil. It turned without another word and vanished into the mist. That was the day we stopped calling it a siege and started calling it a civil war. There's something primal about laying a foundation, steel to soil, bolts into bedrock. The first frame of a structure that says, we're not going anywhere. We started pushing the line 2 days after the failed truce. Not because it was strategic, not because we had the resources. We did it because screw them. This was our dirt now, and if we were going to bleed on it, it better be big enough to bury them and us. The expansion directive wasn't approved by Earth Command, wasn't even suggested. It started with UN dragging the weather rig out past the kill zone and hammering it into the ridge line. When I asked what he was doing, he just said, needs more sun out here. That's all it took. By dusk, we'd cleared 100 meters beyond the wall, built a second generator cradle, planted fast germinating seed strains, deployed a modified terraform sprayer to start oxidizing the deeper layers of soil. Terraforming under siege. The aliens didn't know how to respond. Their religion treated soil as sacred, but changing it was considered desecration. Watching us convert their battlefield into viable farmland must have been like watching someone scribble on their holy books with a crayon. We set up loudspeakers, broadcast audio of our construction cycles on loop, drove them mad. They attacked twice, light probes, testing. We beat them back with fertilizer mines and a welded exoloader we turned into a mobile gun turret. It was during one of those clashes that Lehane took a gray shot to the neck. Plasma burn. Ugly one. I dragged her back behind the ridge, jammed a stem into her thigh, and held her hand until the painkillers kicked in. She looked up at me, bloody and breathing like a furnace, and said, "If I die here, grow something on me." "You're not dying," I told her. "Not until we've got a park named after you." She smiled. "Lehane Memorial Lyson Field? Sounds romantic." She lived, and the soil kept spreading. It started with a joke. Ewan scrawled it in chalk on the side of the comms shed. "Welcome to the Sovereign Republic of Free Soil. Population still alive." We laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were founders, builders of something new, something no Xeno empire, no divine doctrine, no Earth bureaucrat could claim. By now, the air scrubbers worked. The plants were growing in clusters, not rows. Our water table was stable. The terraforming systems, patched, cannibalized, reprogrammed, had passed the critical threshold. Erebus was alive, and we were its beating heart. So we made it official. I gathered the crew, those still breathing, patched up, half mad and fully committed, at the center of the compound. Kessler leaned on a steel cane. Lehane had a bandage over her collarbone, and Ewan was missing 2 fingers, but none of them flinched when I spoke. We held the line. We pushed it forward. Now we plant a flag. I pulled out a pole, nothing fancy. Just a steel rod, 3 meters tall, capped with a solar beacon and wrapped in a tattered Terran mission banner. It had burn holes, blood stains, bits of soot that would never wash off. We drove it into the center of the outpost, and then we transmitted. Open band, high power, sent skyward to Earth, to the sovereign lineage, to anyone listening in this quadrant. "This is Terraforming Unit X, R721. Hostile occupation repelled. Colony secure. Effective immediately, this land is declared free soil. First sovereign, Terran colony, founded under fire. We are not leaving. We are not negotiating. We are home." Didn't take long for the aliens to respond. This time, it wasn't a sermon. It was a retreat. We watched from the ridgeline as their skiffs lifted off one by one, columns breaking, banners furled. No final charge, no last stand. Just the cold, bitter silence of a failed holy war. Later, Kessler sat beside me on the crater lip, sipping synth-calf and staring at the twin suns. "Think they'll be back?" "Maybe." "Think we'll hold again?" I nodded. "If it works once, it's doctrine." The signal took 9 days to reach Earth. 9 days of rebuilding, rearming, replanting. 9 days of silence from the stars. No orders, no updates, just static, dust storms, and the slow rhythmic heartbeat of a world we'd made ours. Then the reply came. It wasn't a command. It was a speech. Not from a general, not from a director. Hell, not even from the Colonial Oversight Committee. It came from the president of the Terran Unity Council herself. Broadcast across every known frequency, from the Martian rings to Jupiter Station, to the frontier nav arrays orbiting XR721. I stood in the comms shack, signal crackling through recycled cabling and patched antennae, as her voice, firm, calm, and unmistakably human, said, "This is a message to every citizen of Terra. Today, we recognize the founding of the free soil colony on planet X, R721. Born under siege, forged in adversity, proof that the frontier is not only possible, it is ours. Outside, the crew had gathered, faces upturned toward the janky loudspeakers we'd mounted on a half-melted transport container. They held not for conquest, not for glory, but because they believed a patch of lifeless ground could become a legacy, and because of them, it has. Then came the words I didn't expect. The ones that punched clean through my ribs and latched onto the thing keeping me upright since this all started. Effective immediately, XR721 is officially recognized as humanity's first independent colonial nation, with full sovereign rights under the Terran Charter. Its name, ratified and permanent, free soil. We didn't cheer. Not at first. There was silence, a long, deep quiet. The kind that comes after a wound finally stops bleeding. Then Kessler raised his mug. To the compost pile. Laughter, real laughter, ragged, breathless, stupid, and beautiful. Later that night, I walked out past the line, past the fallback trenches, past Vale's burn, all the way to where the first alien banner had once stood. I knelt, dug into the dirt with my bare hands, and planted something small, green, and stubborn, a sprig of earth clover. I whispered to the ground like it could hear me. You're not just soil anymore, you're ours. The next attack never came. Not the next day, not the next week, not even when we expanded the perimeter another 100 meters and started laying the first concrete for a hydroponics dome. The sovereign lineage was gone, retreated, disbanded, perhaps recalculating somewhere beyond the ridge or in orbit. But they never came back for round two. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they realized what we already knew. You can't conquer what refuses to stop growing. Instead of war, we got visitors. The first ship broke atmo during third shift. A sleek Terran recon corvette scarred by micrometeor burns and scorched plating. It circled low, scanned us for a solid 5 minutes, then pinged the comm tower like it had been waiting 20 days to speak. Damn proud of you dirt freaks, the pilot said, her voice ragged with laughter and awe. Resupply en route. Long live free soil. We didn't cheer. Not immediately. We breathed. Deep, full, racking breaths that tasted like ozone and ash and the faint chlorophyll. Bite of life returning to the air. That was when the tears came. Lehane dropped her welding torch and covered her face with soot-slick gloves. Ewan sat in the dust outside the new comms array and carved a crude memorial wall from a sheet of salvaged hull, then began etching names into it. Ours, theirs, anyone who bled to make this place ours. And Kessler started preaching. Not in a pulpit, not with scripture, but with oil-streaked hands and the rasp of a man who had inhaled more smoke than sermon. His voice cracked, his leg brace hissed, and he spoke to every rookie engineer and wide-eyed logistics officer stepping down from the first support dropship. You see this dirt, he said, stomping a boot into the packed ash-gray soil beneath his brace. It took blood. It took 27 days of holding the line with nothing but improvised war crimes, duct tape, and collective rage. We didn't inherit this world. We didn't discover it. We built it. That makes us gods. Not because we were born divine, because we earned it. They called it Kesslerism. It was a joke at first, then a doctrine. Then somehow it became a culture, and it spread faster than any tech packet. We taught the new arrivals the rules of free soil, not just how to survive, but how to endure with purpose, how to splice greenhouse cables to overload plasma shields, how to spot a crawler's silhouette in moonlight, how to cook algae protein paste with the exact chemical seasoning ratio to make it almost taste like roasted meat, how to name your trench, how to fight not for medals or orders, but for the principle of life where none should exist. That night, long after the last shipping crate had been offloaded and the perimeter scan grid reestablished, I walked out alone past the southern ridge, out where the shadows still whispered memories of that first siege line, where the soil still bore traces of ash and blood, and I looked up at the stars. There were so many of them, cold, distant, indifferent, and yet beneath them stood something no empire could erase. We hadn't just repelled an invasion. We hadn't just survived. We had done the impossible. We had claimed a lifeless world, not through superior firepower, not through divine mandate, not through some glorious conquest, but through sheer human conviction, ingenuity, and the relentless belief that even the ugliest ground could be made to bloom. And in doing so, we hadn't just saved ourselves. We had rewritten the frontier. We had become, in the eyes of those who would follow, not pioneers, but gods of the soil. It was supposed to be over. The sovereign lineage had retreated, their banners torn down, and their sacred soil defiled by Terran boots and plows. Earth had acknowledged us. Reinforcements were inbound. The next generation of engineers was arriving, bright-eyed and naive, hauling prefab housing modules and state-approved terraforming gear like they were unpacking a future. And still, we dug in. Not because we expected another wave, but because retreat was never on the table, and replanting meant we had failed. There were whispers in the calm, logs, fragments of decoded chatter between sovereign fleet elements suggesting a second crusade, a vengeance flotilla, something bigger, something pure. But the longer the silence stretched, the more it felt like they were licking wounds rather than rearming. Even so, we didn't rebuild the way Earth wanted. We didn't follow the manuals. We tore out the prefab housing units and replaced them with bunkers built from our own specs, designed to take orbital fire, flash flood, acid rain, and sleep-deprived interns all in one shift. We rejected the standardized perimeter layouts and doubled down on irregular trench designs, booby-trapped drone lanes, and remote-triggered collapses based on terrain flow. And when the Earth diplomats arrived, all polished boots and laminated credentials, asking for interviews and artifact samples and plans for cultural integration, we gave them the same line, over and over again. This is free soil. We don't integrate. We adapt. One suit had the nerve to ask if we planned to expand diplomatically, form trade agreements, declare neutrality, allow missionary contact with non-Terran faiths. Ewan laughed so hard he spit ration paste on the guy's boots. Kessler didn't laugh. He stood, leaned on his brace, and said, "You want us to sign papers with people who built biomines out of screaming insects? We signed our contract in blood, ash, and grit. This colony doesn't negotiate with gods who bleed like cattle." That evening, we found a small artifact buried near Sector 5, an old sovereign reliquary, probably a ceremonial device or a tracker. Either way, we burned it, and then we scattered the ashes in the soil. I stood by the trench as the sun dipped below the ridgeline, the light stretching long and bronze over the blasted horizon. The new colonists watched, unsure if this was a ceremony or a warning. Truth is, it was both. Because out here, you don't just plant crops. You plant memory, and you make damn sure no one forgets what it cost to make this dirt ours. It came on the 49th day, no warning, no high orbit scan, just a single streak of fire across the sky at 0300 hours. No signature, no IFF, no transponder beacon. A black comet screaming down on our world like judgment. It hit the far side of the ridge with the kind of impact that shatters geology and questions theology. We didn't hesitate. Half the veterans were already kitting up before the shock wave hit. I strapped on my coil harness, bolted the mag-fed rail launcher to my shoulder, and sent the alert across every outpost channel. We thought it was the lineage, come for vengeance, one last holy fireball to wipe the sin of resistance from their sacred soil. We were wrong. I led the advance team into the crater just before sunrise. Mist clung to the wreckage like ghosts too stubborn to move on. The vessel wasn't sovereign, too angular, too sharp, too wrong. It wasn't a ship built to carry troops or deliver sermons. It was a weapon. Carved across its hull was a sigil we'd never seen, jagged and twitching even in still light, etched in what looked like cauterized bone. Kessler muttered, "That ain't sovereign." Lahane's scanner whined, then glitched. I've never seen a power signature this unstable. Then the scream hit, not through the air, through everything. Our gear, our helmets, our minds. Something inside that wreck was alive and angry and ancient in ways we weren't built to understand. We should have pulled back. Instead, I gave the only order that ever mattered on free soil. Hold the line. Whatever it was, whatever horror had been flung across stars and sacrilege to land here, it had picked the wrong patch of dirt to crawl into. Because we fought. No strategy, no reinforcements. Just 69 weather-worn engineers, medics, welders, and rogue techs armed with fury and fabrication. We hit the breach with flamers loaded with acid gel, repurposed railguns, shock coils, sonic charges wrapped in rebar, and a vengeance born not of revenge, but purpose. The thing came out crawling, limbs like glass, flesh like oil, its voice a vibration inside the skull that said, all roots must rot. We gave it a different reply. We buried it in thermite, sealed the crater with a collapsed payload from our last fusion reactor. Ewan stayed behind to trigger it. His last words on comm were, tell Earth to plant roses here. When it was over, the ridge was glass. The soil beneath it still smoked days later. We planted Ewan's boots where we last saw him and ringed them with clover. The field grew fast, faster than it should have. Green, stubborn, and bright as hell. Word got out. Earth sent more than supplies. They sent envoys, architects, historians. They called us heroes. We didn't correct them. But in the archives, in the code we leave for those who come after, we tell the real story. Not of the siege, not of the war, of the soil, of how it remembers, how it absorbs sacrifice, pressure, heat, and turns it into life. Not clean, not pretty, but alive. And there, written in plasma-welded steel, bolted above the colony gate, hangs the final tenet of free soil. We didn't come to conquer. We came to plant. And we're still planting.